Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Michael and Patty Show, otherwise known as
Maps.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Patty.
And it is, October, end of October, almost the winter here in PEI, 2 degrees. If you're new to the show, Patty and I put the real in PEI real estate. We would consider this Prince Edward Island's best resource for Prince Edward Island real estate and everything PEI. We have over 4 decades of combined experience in PEI real estate, offering the advantage of thousands of transactions. We offer no self-promotion. We try to be as transparent as possible. And the only goal to this show is to help buyers and sellers, mainly of PEI real estate. But for that matter, real estate's pretty well all the same throughout North America. So if you're listening from another province or state, welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome aboard. It's really a beautiful day out here today, and the fall colors on Prince Edward Island, it's one of my favorite times of year because it's just so vibrant with the colors. So moving along to our Facebook group. So our Facebook group we have is called Moving to Prince Edward Island from the Michael and Patty Show, or the Michael and Patty podcast, I believe is what it's actually referred to. We have over 953 members. What that means to you, if you're looking for a group for added support, maybe some information and an opportunity to do your due diligence and educate yourself, please check out the Michael and Patty Show podcast Facebook group, where we do release a snapshot of each of these episodes so that you can go in before you choose to listen and decide if this is the one that's maybe relevant to me. Plus, there's also Toolbox Tuesdays, which has a lot of invaluable information from free websites available on Prince Edward Island to how to prepare for a hurricane and even how to prepare for a move, whether it's local or across country.
Let's get to our first topic, shall we?
Absolutely.
First topic is something that actually happened to me last week. I was involved with a transaction or in a transaction with an older home that hadn't transacted or sold for many decades. And what happened is the purchaser's lawyer said the deed is invalid. There are some concerns as to the way it was written and former or legacy right-of-ways and access to the main road and all this sort of stuff. And I thought this would be a good topic to cover on the podcast because I never really thought about this, and you don't until it's too late because hindsight's always 20/20. But if you do have an older house that does have a lot of stuff on the deed in reference to things that may or may not exist anymore, particularly popular with old farmhouses and that, where they've given lands away or lines have been moved, you may want to do a couple things. Number one, have your lawyer check out your deed prior to putting your house on the market or when you put it on the market. Make sure it makes sense and ultimately have a plot plan done up, which is a survey with the buildings on it in the case that you're selling a structure or a house or some commercial entity structure, or if it's land, get a survey done. That would validate that the deed is in fact good, because what could have happened with this particular situation is the closing could have been delayed. These people already have another house to move into. They're moving all their stuff out this weekend. It would have turned into a catastrophic mess of an event, all because of the deed and the fact that the purchaser's lawyer waited until the last week to express issues with the deed. Now, in this particular case, we lucked out. The purchasers are moving ahead regardless. Patty, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's a really interesting, and I never thought of having a bad deed. And one thing, so would title insurance protect a buyer? Is that the path that they ended up opting for? Because a lender would have problems with this.
If you bought a car and you bought an insurance policy or coverage on it, but all the wheels fell off every week when you're driving to work, would that be the solution?
No.
Title insurance just makes sure that if there is any issues with the deed, you may be protected through that insurance policy. But if I'm buying a property, the biggest challenge here is, and as far as I know, for decades in other provinces and states, you have to have a plot plan and or a survey when you're selling a property. Here, they don't do that. The survey or the plot plan's based on the deed, So without getting that done, you don't know whether the deed is valid. I wouldn't even get into the conversation about title insurance because you're warranting something that's invalid. Why would you want to buy something that's wrong and then insure it afterwards?
Oh, I completely
That's
agree.
like buying a house that's already burned to the ground, but you're not going to tell the insurance company that, but you're going to insure it and collect the policy money later.
No, I understand. I'm just wondering how these guys were able to move forward.
Whenever you have a buyer that's willing to buy and the seller that's willing to sell, it's going to happen, right?
Yeah, so I wonder if there was a lender involved. If it was a cash buy, I guess it wouldn't be as problematic. That would be my understanding or guess. Interesting, though. Thank you. I've not even considered that being a problem.
I'll let you cover this next topic, making a list of personal items.
Yeah, so when we have agreement of purchase and sales, many buyers will decide to go house shopping for the chattels within the house sometimes. And a lot of times you'll see this when it comes to bed and breakfasts as well, because it is part of running the business or a cottage business or an Airbnb business. What I typically end up advising, if I'm representing the buyer or seller, is whatever the shortest list is. Because I have in the past, and you know of this story, Michael, where I wrote an offer, I was representing the seller, and I had another agent present an offer to myself and my seller, and they wanted to have an itemized list of all the inclusions. Well, it turned out it was like 30 some odd pages because my sellers, being a high C personality, which is if you study DISC, you would understand that's a very analytical person, like your typical accountant type thing. Engineer brain, absolutely. They listed everything right down to counting the rolls of toilet paper, and this now became part of the agreement of purchase and sale, which now had to be printed off in its entirety. The lawyers had to go through this. So to keep things simple, write down the list of like the shorter list, whether it's the exclusions or the inclusions, because it'll be far easier to manage and to be able to audit on closing day when you're there with the buyer and you're trying to go through and make sure everything is there. Also, a really good rule of thumb would be to take pictures of everything that you know, or a quick video of the property at the time of, say, your home inspection, if you've got a contract agreement on this property, and obviously the seller has agreed or consented to allow you to do this. That way you have a little bit of a reference guide to refer back to when you are doing that final closing walkthrough to make sure things are consistent. Because after a month or 2 months, your memory can sometimes be a little cloudy and you can't remember what was sitting over in that particular corner. Do you have anything, Michael?
Did they indicate how many sheets of toilet paper there was on each of the remaining rolls? If these were like complete rolls or were they partially used?
No, but it really was detailed to the bars of soap, the washcloths, the number of forks. Like it became such an extensive list. And I did offer to make things simple and said my sellers would be in agreement to providing to you the shorter list because pretty much everything will remain. And I don't know if it was the buyer's agent that decided this or if it was the buyer's, but it was a big project. It did take my clients over a week to be able to put this entire list together. And it just seemed absolutely silly and ridiculous.
Sometimes what you'll see with an offer, particularly on a typical house, or more likely with a cottage, is they'll offer on the property and they'll basically say that everything's included within that purchase price. And then they'll ask the owners or the vendors to give them a list of what they're referring to as personal items, which may or may not be personal. Could be a TV set or whatever. But they're supplying an exclusion list. The important thing is, at the end of the day, come closing time, come pre-closing inspection, which we've discussed before, just make sure your documents are in order and they're concise and exact, and you're not using descriptions like personal items and leaving it at that. because to me, that TV could be a personal item, or the fridge, or all the furniture. As Patty's discussed before, she had one person that thought all their furniture was personal items.
Yeah, they
Moving
showed.
along.
Well, yeah, my clients, and they were Americans. I had to do a video walkthrough on this particular property, and it was agreed upon that it did say, like, all personal, seller would take all personal items. And between the agent and I, because I had it in writing through text, that all the furniture items were going to remain, somewhere along the line, unfortunately, and this was early me days, somewhere along the line, somebody must have planted the seed in the seller's head that personal items was not a clear description as to what they had to take. They actually sold off a bunch of stuff, and it was pretty much a vacant, empty house with only a dining room table left.
Because we discuss everything and anything about real estate, today we're also going to discuss the use of portable air conditioners. You've seen these before, Patty. These air conditioners, you roll around on your floor. They're convenient. You don't have to lift them up to the window and break your back. You just have the little hose leading to the window. What do you think of those?
Well, I always thought that they were the more, like, superior, if you will, air conditioning systems versus the traditional ones that fit in the window if your home isn't equipped with a heat pump system, which provides heat and AC here. It's a popular item the last probably 5+ years on Prince Edward Island.
Well, it's a good thing you brought that subject up, because looking at like a mini split air conditioning heating system that you're seeing in today's modern homes, and you're also seeing people install these. There's even, or was, government incentive programs that would pay for the vast majority of the expense. There's the hot part that's outside and the cold part's on the inside, right?
Correct.
Here's the problem with the portable air conditioners, which I was completely unaware of and tripped over when I was doing some research on the ultimate window air conditioner, which I'll get to next, is the problem with the portable air conditioners is you've got the hot part and the cold part, whether it's the evaporator, condenser, we're not going to get into all that, but essentially they're not separated. So in one box, you've got the hot air going through the tube, which gives off a heat signature. By the way, that thermal imaging camera is on its way.
Oh.
So I'll have that on hand to check this stuff out in the future. But if you take a thermal imaging camera, you'll see that the hose just glows red, as does some of the unit that you've got in your room or bedroom or wherever it may be. In addition to that, you're also creating a negative airflow or a vacuum in that room. You've noticed sometimes you try to open the door on a room that has a portable air conditioner, it's difficult to open. It's because it's creating, or it's easy to open because it's creating a vacuum under the door. So you're sucking all the hot air in that room from the hallway. Bottom line is, and this is probably the most valuable tip you'll ever get from this podcast, maybe the only tip, check out the Midea air conditioners, Midea. I discovered one of these in a house. I don't know where they're from. I think they're originally designed in Europe, but they're basically almost like an air conditioner that goes into the window, but you can still open and close your window because there's probably only about 2 or 3 inches of components or structure at the meeting point where the window touches. So these are supposed to be the coldest, most efficient. They've got an inverter version, which apparently is super energy or electricity efficient. So check out Midea, not a sponsor. And what time of year is it best to buy an air conditioner?
It would probably be during the cold season, which my guess, probably around January.
January, February. So that's my tip. As a side note, I do have 3 portable air conditioners available for sale if anyone's interested.
Yes, and I always noticed in my son's rooms, because I don't have a heat pump system, their bedrooms always seemed, because they have the portable ACs that sit in their windows.
Well, they're not portable, they're the in-window ones.
The in-window ones. But their rooms have always been so cold, and I've always had the portable AC system that sits on the floor with the hosing, as well as my previous office. And I never found my room would get as cold as theirs, even though I thought I had the superior system. So this is invaluable information, Michael. Thank you.
What's interesting is if you take that illustration, those air conditioners are usually 5 or 6,000 BTUs, and you're wondering how can a 5 or 6,000 BTU air conditioner cool a room better than one that's advertised to be 8 or 10? Well, there has been a number of lawsuits, particularly in Europe, and in Europe they actually have to mark the effective BTUs, which are usually 20 to 25%, just going by memory, less efficient than the in-window air conditioner. So they're no longer saying this is just 10. They're saying it's 10, but by the time you incorporate all the heat you're reintroducing to the room and the vacuum from the hallway, we're dropping this down to 65. And that's why those in-window air conditioners, even though they're smaller BTU-wise, are producing much colder air.
Nice.
It's amazing what you can find on YouTube.
No, good research.
Patty, I had a situation where I ran across somebody that just wasn't happy in their marriage. Maybe it's not a marriage, maybe it's just a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. Can you offer any advice to our listeners as to how this person, in a nonchalant way, can sort of get rid of their spouse or co-inhabitant?
My recommendation is get your real estate license. Real estate agents, due to our unpredictability of hours and sometimes very long hours, our inconsistent income, sometimes our travel, if we are somebody that, seeks education or just sales in general, sometimes can have you on the road. It is a high stress, long hours, sometimes with periods of time throughout the year with low income. We are in the top, I remember years ago I looked at this, Michael, and we were in the top 5, 6 for the highest divorce rates. They don't really provide, I don't know if Google's expanded and there's so much more information and other high stress jobs, but we are up there near the top. In the United States, they have, for a first-time marriage, about a 40 to 50% divorce rate for somebody in the sales.
So not happy with your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, get into real estate, and they should probably go away out of frustration.
Yeah, it is pretty stressful, and the marriage it's not an easy business to be in, much to what a lot of people think that this is, we just cash checks and walk around with keys in our pocket.
I just recently bought a new clothes dryer, so that I wanted a match set, so I was getting rid of the washing machine. What's the best thing somebody can do to get rid of that used appliance, or whether it's a couch, or maybe it's a fridge or a stove, or whatever the case may be, assuming they're in good condition and they're working? What can they do in, I believe, all of North America to get rid of that item and hopefully help somebody else out?
Yeah, most people will defer or refer to going on Facebook Marketplace to get rid of their items. You hear all the time that people have to keep reducing their price on Marketplace. Some people find success on that. Appliances and household items can sometimes sit a little longer. If this isn't something where you 100% need the money for your own survival, especially if you're a realtor and, we have our crazy up and down seasons, the best use of these items instead of Marketplace would be to donate them to Habitat for Humanity. The funds, the proceeds from the sale go to actually building homes for people to get them into home ownership and people otherwise that would never have the opportunity.
And didn't you volunteer to help them build a house at one point?
Yeah, we did. When I was with a previous real estate brokerage, we went to Habitat for Humanity. We did a build up in North Rustico. It was a single mom with 2 little boys. It was one of the most rewarding experiences that I have had. I mean, I've done many volunteer positions in that, but just to see the mother, she would bring food during our days there to feed us lunches. The one day she brought her 2 sons with her so that they could see the people that were helping build their new home. And it was just such an empowering feeling. It just felt really, really good. There were long days and it's not easy, but what a rewarding experience.
Even though it cost you a thumb.
It cost me a thumb. No, I actually was the one that put on the vinyl siding and that on that particular home.
We discussed things we should maintain in a household last weekend when we were watching the Charlottetown Marathon. And one of those things was a Venmar. Well, it was just last week. I actually had all the ducts and the dry cleaning vent cleaned out to avoid being one of those 2,700 houses that catches on fire because your dryer vent hasn't been cleaned in years. But the people that did the duct cleaning said something to me that was really interesting. They said your Venmar or your air exchanger is filled with drywall dust.
That's not good.
Which made me think, handy little tip, if you're getting drywall work done or renovations of any kind, let's say you're sanding wood or whatever, you've got the wood dust or wood chips around, turn your air recirculation pump off. Otherwise, it's going to end up in your machine and then you're going to be breathing that.
Yeah, and not to assume that the contractor, if you do hire a contractor to come in, that they will think of this. They're probably just focused on getting the job done. So a very valuable tip is to make sure, regardless, if you know you have home renovations, whether you're doing them yourself or whether you do have a contractor in, make note of this to make sure that your air exchange system is turned off during the renovation.
And you should probably have it cleaned. They're saying every 2 to 3 years. I would be more inclined to be 2 years. Dryer vent, depending how long it is. In this case, it's 35, 40 feet long. You almost want to get that done yearly. Moving along here, what's the absolute worst thing you could ever tell a home seller?
The worst thing would be when you have a showing on a property to let the seller know that there might be an offer coming or there's such strong interest they're talking about offering. Because I find that just now the seller is looking forward to it, they're anticipating it. Sometimes they may have called all their family or friends and said, guess what, we're getting an offer on the property. Not that we might be getting an offer on it. And all this does is sets your seller up for this emotional roller coaster of extreme highs and extreme lows when the offer doesn't present itself and it doesn't come to fruition. Now you've just, unfortunately, in my opinion, have done a disservice to that seller. This communication can stay between the realtors. You, if you're a realtor listening to this and you have feedback from a buyer's agent saying they absolutely loved the house and we're discussing an offer, might have something to you tomorrow, I would be putting that through your filter and just saying it was a very positive showing. They really liked the home. They're going to be discussing, their next steps or what they would like to do or discussing all the properties that they had looked at that day. And keep it at that. Keep it simple.
A month and a half ago, an agent told me there'll be an offer coming in on this building lot. Corey, I'm still waiting for that offer. So I get that too, and I haven't been waiting by my phone for that offer, but we get that as well. Oh, there's an offer coming in. You're thinking about writing something up. It's like in one ear, out the other. Until you have the offer, it's not done, and it's not accepted until it's signed. Even if they do accept it verbally, you need it signed because people change their mind. I've had vendors change their mind overnight. They'll tell you on a Friday they're going to accept it. Saturday morning, they've sobered up and they're not accepting it.
Yeah, and just what does it feel like as a seller, because I've just been through this too in the last week or so, is my seller client, because I was aware that there was an offer possibly coming in, and I say possibly even though they did say that they were looking at preparing an offer. I knew there was an offer possibly coming in. I chose not to. I thought, well, the showing was later in the day. It was a Friday. I'm not going to even message my client that night because it's just going to, maybe they were somewhere else. They were enjoying, friends or having a quiet evening. And I didn't want to plant any seeds. So I thought I'm just going to hold the feedback until the next day just to see if there is an actual offer that comes in. So the conversation with my seller when the offer did come in, because she no sooner sent me a message and said, and this was about midday on Saturday, so I haven't received any feedback, and we do use showing time, and the buyer's agent didn't put anything in showing time, but just asked, I haven't received anything. And wouldn't you know, within 5 minutes of that message coming through to me, I did end up receiving an offer. So when I sat down with my client that weekend and we went over the offer, she was super excited and very appreciative. And she asked, "Did you know the offer was coming in?" And I was honest and I said, "I was aware there was the possibility of an offer coming in on Friday night, but I chose not to stress you out or get your hopes up just in case it didn't." And she thanked me. She thanked me for sparing her a possible disappointment or that emotional roller coaster, because she said she probably wouldn't have slept that night in anticipation of it the next day. So you're not, if you're a realtor listening, doing your client a disservice. In many cases, they'll appreciate you. That's why they've hired you as their professional.
You indicated that there's a new feature that's part of the realtor.ca system. And what this feature does for those home sellers or property sellers that love statistics and love to know how many people have looked at their listing and where these people are from and so on and so forth, you indicated that there's now an automated way to set that up so they could receive it daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so if you're a seller and you do not have, and your property's not under contract, obviously, with, a buyer agreement, if you're a seller and you're sitting there and you're wondering, I haven't received any idea as to what kind of activity is my property, receiving. Is there many people that are even seeing it? I'm not getting any showings, or I'm getting lots of showings. What's going on? You just want to know what's going on with your property listing and how it's faring on the market. Your realtor has the option, and it's a great tool. It's the Members Realtor app. And for realtors listening, it is if you go into download apps, it is the black Realtor app, not the red one that the public uses. And right within that app, you're able to schedule activity reports or stats. You can set them up where it's just a one-time. You can set it up where they are sent weekly, monthly, and to whether it's to a text message or it's an email, however your client wishes to be communicated with. It is just an awesome form of communication. And communication is key here because according to the National Association of Realtors in the States, consumers' number one complaint about realtors is a lack of communication. Well, CREA couldn't have made this easier for us by providing us this app, this tool that allows better communication between the seller client as well as the realtor. So if you're a seller and you don't have it, ask your realtor to get you set up on that.
You're renting out your cottage, and your cottage owner wants to know what the best options are to rent that cottage out, presumably daily, preferably on a weekly basis. What would you suggest for platforms or methodologies?
Well, I would say VRBO, there's an Airbnb site. Those would be the platforms that I'd be using. I'm curious to see where you would be recommending, Michael.
In the old days, there's a lot of different websites that cater to cottage rentals. I'm finding statistically most of them are using Airbnb, VRBO. The other one I like is Cottage Link. Alternatively, use a property manager because they probably already have the list of clienteles and the advertising methods to acquire those rentals. And they also take care of cleaning the premises, flipping them, handling any questions or queries or concerns or maintenance issues. So those are your options.
I think it's a business. Obviously, PEI relies on tourism, and there's many here that's why they decided to move to PEI, retire, and get into, running a cottage business. And that, I think it's a great option.
What do you say to a client that's looking at buying a house? It's fairly expensive for the purposes of this conversation, and they say they have to talk to their financial advisor first. Without knocking financial advisors.
No, I'm sure they serve their purpose, but I do feel that financial advisors are there. And again, we all have our business and we all need to get paid. But to, yes, advise, provide a service. If you don't know what to do with the monies that you have, your investments, They are an option to educate and show you what is available to you. But at the end of the day, it's taking the money from your bank account and taking a little piece of that and sticking it in their bank account.
At the end of the day, the financial advisor business model, which is awesome for them, is they usually get paid on a percentage each and every month of the funds they're managing. So if you decide to take out $1 million to buy a house, you're cutting into their income stream. So just keep that in mind. There may or may not be a conflict of interest, but there is potential for potential bias or a prejudicial answer to that question.
Yeah, so it's the only reason we bring this up is just so that you ask better questions of your financial advisor to make sure that you protect your money, your investments.
Long open times for counteroffers. Have you ever done this? What this means is we get an offer that has a bunch of conditions. So what we do is we write up a counteroffer, but what we do is we leave the counteroffer open long enough that most, if not all, of those conditions can be removed. So by the time that counteroffer is signed, that deal is pretty well firmed up. I know a lot of people have a hard time getting their head around this, but I have done this in the past, particularly if you do have 4 or 5 conditions and they all expire in 4 or 5 days. Just leave the counteroffer open for 4 or 5 days. They sign it, it's a done deal, rather than going through a list of conditions that they will remove one at a time or maybe 2 or 3 at a time, just adding to the paperwork and the thickness of the file.
Absolutely. And I know you have used this as an approach or a strategy in your representation with the seller, and it does offer an opportunity. A lot of our offers, Michael, have, and especially I find a lot of newer agents will put in solicitor's approval.
That's what I was just about to bring up.
What's it?
In the case of solicitor's approval, there's a reason why. I'll step back here. So the purchase and sale usually has a Schedule A attached to it. The Schedule A has a set of standard paragraphs they use here in PEI. One of those paragraphs is, in simple English, it's subject to my lawyer reviewing this agreement and finding it acceptable. But at the same token, by putting that paragraph in the contract, it validates the contract. It's like saying, I want to buy this car, but my mommy has to say it's okay. So what you can do is if you leave the counteroffer open for even 3 days, it allows them to talk to their lawyer, and you remove that condition in the counteroffer. All the other conditions remain in place, but at least you don't have one condition which basically makes that contract worthless.
Correct. And that would be one of those clauses that, like, I've had an offer this year, Michael, where the agent, and it was a newer agent, put solicitor's approval all the way to closing because she was apparently taught this by her colleagues, that that's something that you do. And I tried my best to make her feel like she was misinformed in the nicest of ways. But to say, I'm not being difficult here, that clause needs to go. And this is just a strategy or a technique that you can do by leaving your counter open a little bit longer and say, hey, if your client is feeling a little bit timid about, moving forward, or they have some questions about a clause, get your solicitor's approval done prior to, or put in the counter like you do, Michael, that once they sign that solicitor's approval, which is really the only major that's pre-written within our contracts. There's obviously agents that can add in to represent their buyer a ton of extra clauses and attach a Schedule B or whatever to the contract. But our standard clauses, the solicitor's approval is the only one that I typically don't like.
And there was only one reason that solicitor's approval was put in, and only one reason alone, because obviously common sense dictates if you want your lawyer to check over a contract, you can do so before presenting it. I know a lot of people are too cheap, and what they're saying is, I don't want to spend money on a lawyer before I have a contract in place. But from the seller's perspective, they're saying, how serious can the buyer be if they don't want to spend any money having their lawyer inspect the contract because they don't believe maybe 100% in the agent they've hired?
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say, Michael. is it is there to protect the representative, the realtor.
The purchaser's agent.
Yeah, it is there to protect us when we're writing it so that we can indemnify ourselves and say, hey, your lawyer approved this contract that I wrote.
No, that's not the way it works exactly. You've got the paragraph is in there. It says this is subject to your lawyer's approval. So the purchaser's removing the paragraph. So then the purchaser's agent, indemnifies yourself because you can say, well, the paragraph was in there. The purchaser elected to remove it.
Correct.
In fact, you could even go a step further if you wanted to carry this conversation on and fill out another form that says, I advised them to keep this paragraph in. They elected to remove it, so too bad for you.
Yes.
For further indemnification on the purchaser's side. What's that form called? Acknowledgement of removal of something or other?
Yes, so we do have a new form.
So basically, the form just says anything they remove, home inspection, water test, solicitor's approval, you put in this other form, which basically says the purchasers, under their own volition, decided to remove these paragraphs against my advice. Where you see this form most popularly used is when purchasers are buying properties completely sight unseen, because there has been some situations where purchasers have come here and it's nothing like the AI-generated photo that they offered on.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Or during COVID, when we were receiving multiple offer situations, which is when this form ended up presenting itself, and you were up against whether it's 5 or 15 other offers to make their offer more attractive, buyers were removing all their conditions only to find themselves in a situation later and say, well, my agent told me to remove that clause if I wanted to get this house. So that's when that was incorporated to protect the realtors, because we should be advising our clients to do their due diligence, and it is their contract agreement. We are just the facilitator and providing our education and representation and the use of our contracts.
Any property I look at, I do my due diligence by driving by it on Google Earth.
That's one tool. That is one way. And we definitely
don't suggest doing that.
On the Facebook group, that is one of the tools as part of doing your due diligence prior to actually writing an offer or anything, or even booking a showing. Do the drive-by, make sure there's nothing red flagged in the area that as soon as you pull up with your realtor to look at the property and say, well, I had no idea that was next door, not interested. So that's the only time I recommend that, Michael.
But you don't want to use it as 100% assurance that that property looks as it did on Google Earth.
I agree.
For all you know, the place was burned down or renovated, or maybe someone decided to tear down the east wing.
Wonder what that's all about.
You've got a client that has a house or a cottage, and they're panicked now that it hasn't sold in 60 days. What did that seller's or vendor's agent not do? They should have educated the client on absorption rates and told them that you have a cottage, it's located in this area, it's priced at this amount of money. So based on absorption rates, based on the amount of cottages we move in that price range, you could be on the market for, this is not an exaggeration in the Maritimes, 2 or 3 years. So in this particular case, the cottage seller was surprised her cottage hadn't sold in a few months. But when you looked at the data, it wasn't doing anything exceptional. It was following statistics and the information that we have based on that price range, because they were in a higher price range for this market. So naturally, it's going to sit longer based on absorption rates. So if you're an agent listing a cottage that's fairly expensive in an area where they're not selling expensive cottages because all the other cottages are a quarter of the price, educate your sellers and tell them, do not expect this to be sold in 60 days if that's your expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because our market, we're no longer in the 2021, 2022 market days. Our market it has changed. It is, like to just call it, it's a bit of a weird market while we're still trying to navigate ourselves on the other side of COVID.
It's
and
normalizing.
Interest. Well, you call it normalizing, but it just sometimes seems to be a little bit up and down. It's erratic. because of COVID and because of the number in 2022, we sold over 28 properties on Prince Edward Island that were over $1 million. Everyone thinks their property, when we're talking about absorption rates now, Michael, they feel their properties are worth over $1 million. I just pulled the stats on the absorption rate and how much inventory that we have on Prince Edward Island, currently active, over $1 million. Do you know what the absorption rate is? How long could a seller expect it to take to sell that property?
A long time.
Yes, we're at
because
5 years.
Things are normalizing. And what I mean by normalizing, my definition would be, and this may be different from yours or somebody else's, is I can do a CMA or an appraiser can do an appraisal on a property, and they will find that the sale number or the number that property transacts at is consistent with the data set they're using. Where when we had an irrational or a non-normalized market during COVID, when everyone was buying on emotion and they're paying double and triple what properties were worth based on previous sales data, that was not a normal market. We're starting to see the sale prices align with what has sold in the past.
And in the last, I would say that's been probably since around 2024. January 2024 to today, being October 2025, yes, there is more of a normalization, and it does. The purchase price does reflect what the data says. So when you're doing a reverse CMA on a property and you're wondering, is this list price in alignment with the market or the current market, there should be, as more properties have transacted over the last year and a half, 2 years, there should be data to support an effective, fair CMA and a fair market value price for the property that you're looking to purchase.
And you can see this in the higher density areas, like the area I live in. You will see houses go up for sale, and you'll see the ones that are priced appropriately based on market data, CMAs, appraisals. They will transact in the allotted time that the absorption rate dictates, where you see the dreamers and the people that still think we're in COVID times that are $100,000, $200,000 overpriced and a $500,000 house. These are the houses that are sitting there. And even yesterday I drove around, I thought, there's a house that's been sitting there forever. It's overpriced. They've got no finished basement. So if you compare that house with the other houses that did have finished basements that were in alignment with the market data, they all transacted as per the absorption rates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real estate agent safety. This is another stat that was quite interesting, and this is actually really strong advice for agents that are showing properties. I couldn't believe this number. They're saying almost 10% of real estate agents get physically assaulted. That seems like a big number. And I made this stat up. I would say that probably 100% of anyone that's been in real estate for longer than 10 years full time has probably been verbally assaulted.
Have you been verbally assaulted?
A few times. And I know you have as well.
Yes.
And it's never our fault. It's always because there's so much emotion involved. They don't understand what's going on, even though you do your best to try to explain things. You mix emotion with money, and sometimes that adds up to a bad recipe. But I didn't believe the number was as close to 10% for physical assaults. I absolutely believe the made-up stat that I came up with, 100%. I believe that. I mean, people get heated when they're talking about money in their house.
Well, and
not only that, if I can interrupt you for
Sure.
one more second, everyone thinks their house is the best and the deed is perfect and the survey is the prettiest, the views are the best, the builder is the best, the location is the best, and the floor is the best. And they're not. As you know from personal experience, having owned properties that were supposed to be built by the best, in quotations, builder on earth, turned out to be a giant piece of junk.
they definitely cut corners.
Every corner.
Yes.
There is no square corners. They're all circles, round corners. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things I was going to say too is why I think that the 100% verbal, probably, and I would just say 99%, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that's going to say, I've never had anyone ever say anything negative to me. My clients have always been really happy. I'm just going to let you know, maybe you haven't done estates or divorces, because it's not just your standard, whether it's a first-time home buyer, whether you're a buyer relocating. There's so many different situations and circumstances in which real estate happens. And it's upsizing and downsizing and first time and leaving the market. There's estate sales, there's divorces. Like, we deal with everything. You would think a prerequisite or a requirement, Michael, for a realtor to have their license would be a psychology degree because of how much the emotions are raw and they're intense and they're not to be dismissed or laughed at or belittled because it's real for these people. And I know, I've dealt with an estate where I was primarily to be only speaking with the executor, but I had all the kids that were part of this, and a couple of them would call and yell at me on the phone because they were, again, yes, what they were saying wasn't really nice to me. I hadn't done anything wrong, but all I internalized it as is they must really love their deceased loved ones so much. This is their pain and this is them hurting. They're not easy. They're not easy real estate deals to take care of and service.
Or they couldn't wait to fill their bank accounts full of grandma's money and you're holding them up because grandma's house is overpriced.
Well, not only that, they're also, in one situation I remember in the past, they accused me of taking, because of my real estate fees, they were accusing me of taking some of their money. And the one, whenever they had a couple to drink, I'll say, would call me up and just berate me on the phone. So I learned with that particular client, and again, this is just real estate 101. I wouldn't be getting into answering your phone in the evening because you don't know, unless you really know your client and you're in the midst of a negotiation and time is of the essence. But if they're just random phone calls, I learned early on that sometimes if a person has a couple to drink and there's nothing really pending, it's just best I work within my business hours because it may not turn out so well if I decided to be Realtor of the Year and answer the phone at night.
So what can a real estate agent do other than avoiding and never dealing with estate sales or divorces? Because you'll always be an enemy to somebody. Someone will construe the situation that you've turned it into something that it's not and hate your guts, even though you didn't do anything but your job properly. But staying away from divorces, staying away from estate sales, what else should they do? And I know you've done both of these.
So, well, I wouldn't say necessarily black and white, stay away from them, but there are education and training programs, which is one of the things that I'm about to say is education. So I know, like my office, we ended up taking a whole course, which turned out to be a couple months worth of material on how to deal with divorces. We've learned how to deal with seniors selling their homes. So there's lots of education
How about
opportunities.
divorced seniors?
They probably you'd have to take both of them. There's lots of opportunity as a realtor to obtain additional education with regards to dealing with some of these high emotion sales. The other thing is obviously taking or having an interest in psychology, understanding human behavior, and maybe things to say and what not to say. And a lot of times we should just be listening and we shouldn't be offering input because, like you say, Michael, we probably wouldn't say the right thing anyways because we're not psychologists or psychiatrists. The other thing is taking a self-defense training program. I've had education with an RCMP that was held here on Prince Edward Island many years ago, followed up by last year, 2024 and 2025. It was offered as part of our Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association continuing education courses. And I was surprised at the low numbers that had turned out for this, Michael. But the information was invaluable and it was such a just eye-opening opportunity to learn and right down to being groomed as a realtor, what your buyers say to you. So education, dealing with the emotions, education on self-defense. 10% getting physically assaulted. I would believe that because I know I've been stalked as a realtor here on PEI, Michael, and I've had to actually hide my vehicle for a month. Things happen, and I just knew as soon as the red flags went up, I needed to take measures to protect myself.
Let's close it down. Great advice.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Michael and Patty Show, otherwise known as MAPS, PEI's podcast that helps guide and navigate you through the buying and selling, and a little bit of Prince Edward Island, and also some home tips. We appreciate each and every one of you for downloading and listening, and those that also have joined the Facebook group that we have. LinkedIn is still, it's there. I just have to get in there and really start delivering the value to that. So thanks for listening.
Bye for now. Have a great day.